Hello, hello, hello. This is your host, Noah, and you are listening to episode 4 of Techs in the City, a wonderful podcast about all things production, lighting, things of that sort. To kick it off here, let's get going with what we usually do first, which is the news. That is going to be the first order of business, so let's hop right into it. All right. So to start, I'm sure many of you know USITT is this weekend, or started. I believe it started on the 19th, or it officially starts on the 20th and goes through the 23rd. Takes place in Louisville, Kentucky. I've never actually been myself. I know a lot of people who went during high school and a lot of people who went from UNLV. It's more of a, at least the way I view it, it's kind of more of a student thing and a theater thing, kind of. It's more so like, I mean, not necessarily. I mean, there's something for everybody, but I think it's definitely geared more towards helping students out, more so than anyone else. USITT. But apparently this year, they're on track to have a record attendance, which is good because the revenue basically goes to support, theater, the arts, that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a tourist revenue for like supporting theater and the arts and that kind of stuff. So that's always cool. They have tons of hands-on demos. They've got lots of new tech stuff like LDI kind of stuff. But there's also a lot of job opportunities, like a lot of companies, production companies, maybe theater companies, seasons. They'll go there and try to hire techs or whatever else. They'll probably hire tech, stage managers, designers, whatever. They probably hold mock interviews or they interview people on the spot. So they do that kind of stuff as well. They kind of cover all their bases in terms of like conventions, but definitely more geared towards the education side of things, I would say. But it's cool that the revenue that from that supports theater and that kind of stuff, and they have record attendance. So they should make a lot of money this year, and should go to a good cause, supporting the industry that we all work in. That's always cool. And if you're going to USITT, let me know how it was, or let me know how it's going to be, rather. Let me know how it is. Just hit me up. Let me know what's up, USITT. I've never been. I always go to LDI every year, though, but that's only because I'm in Vegas. I have lots of fun at LDI, though. I have fun at conventions. I like to get my wardrobe from conventions as well. Sadly, last LDI, I didn't. I was working for most of it, so I could only go on the last day. I really just wanted to check out the MA3, but I could only go on the last day, so I didn't really get any swag at all this past LDI, which is kind of sad, but that's kind of how it is. I get more and more. I bet every year I'm probably going to be working on it more and more. Hopefully I'll be out on tour and miss it. I'd be totally down for that. But, yeah, LDI is a good time. Maybe this year I'll see some people I know. Get a little meetup going, even though only 13 people listen to this podcast technically, and they're all probably already know me personally. So, all right, next little news item I have here is something different, not necessarily lighting news in the traditional sense of, a concert tour or a theater thing, but this one is actually about an art project called the Shoreline Project. I'm pretty sure it takes place over in the UK. Actually, no, Orange County. But they hired a UK-based company to do something with the lighting. And here's the thing. The lighting, it's not a lighting art project necessarily. Like, it wasn't, the goal of it wasn't just to make something cool with light. It was more about a concept, a performance art piece. And here is, apparently, here, let me just give you a quote from the designer here. The original concept for our performance was inspired by the desire to create a situation where our community would come together joyously. We hoped to create a shared memory of happiness on our much-cherished Pacific border and wanted a design of symbolic depth. Shelter and light bring us together. Seashells are the original mobile home. Mandalas are a symbol of completeness, hence the seashell mandala artwork that was used on the umbrellas. a form of shelter familiar to everyone. So that kind of gives you an idea of what it is. So it's umbrellas with mandalas on it, and there's a video that you can go look up. This is on livedesign.com, but I'm sure you could probably look it up on YouTube. It's called The Shoreline Project from Elizabeth Turk. She's the artist. But basically, people are on the beach with their umbrellas, and the umbrellas are illuminated, both the stock and the actual piece, so people can see the artwork on the umbrella. It's a really cool idea, but apparently it was kind of a tricky thing to design because the lighting part, anyways. Because this is kind of cool with lighting. Is a lot of stuff like this, anyways. Is you kind of have to just kind of do it. Like there's not any lights that you can go buy. Like, oh, let me go buy umbrella lights. No, you have to like engineer it. That was my phone. Ignore that. Engineer it to get it to work. Like it has to be made from scratch, so you have to have a designer, which is a UK company, which is where the United Kingdom company comes in. They're called Specials with a Z, but they're the ones that kind of engineered it, went with her vision, and illuminated the performance art piece, and really gave it another element to it that it didn't have previously. That really brings together the umbrella and the light. So it's a cool idea when it comes to that stuff. But in terms of like the trouble that they had with it, obviously, lighting umbrellas or kind of jerry-rigging stuff to umbrellas to light it, it's kind of hard. But one of the main things is, and is it interesting, and I can totally understand why it would be a problem, is balancing the light levels, making all of them the same across the board. Like stuff that's not, like one of them isn't too bright than the other one, because as a cohesive piece, you'll be able to really tell if, like, especially in the lighting aspect of it, you'll be able to really tell, if one of them's brighter than the other ones, because your eyes are going to be naturally drawn to the brighter thing. So it's definitely important, and it was a challenge to them, was balancing out the light levels. Another thing was power. They were battery powered. They needed to be battery powered, and they needed to be powered by batteries that you get at the convenience store. I think they went with AA's, but it needed to last 3 hours of battery life. So it had to be easy to get a hold of, and it had to last the right amount of time. But as I said, I believe they went with AA batteries. So that solved that problem. And like I said, UK-based company. And something I wanted to, it kind of brings up an interesting topic in regards to lighting design, is that it's not just like architectural lighting design or concert lighting design. There's a lot of little stuff like this that kind of dips into the specialty of lighting and lighting professionals. And I think this is a good opportunity to talk about lighting professionals because it's such a new field, and interestingly, it's an experience-based field too. So you don't have like academics telling you, what's what necessarily. You have the layman, the people out actually doing it, like a lighting professional, and these guys actually master the craft of lighting and actually attain a level of education about light that other people do not have, which is an interesting thing because, especially coming at it from my angle, because I'm working my way up from the bottom. I'm not going to school or anything. I'm just, doing the work. And over time, you develop a true specialty and master over this thing called light. And I think it's really cool to see stuff like this because I like to see lighting being used in all aspects of stuff like of art, because it is an art form. And I think it's really cool that you can have people that are lighting professionals come in and help and do stuff like this. I'm trying to get across what I'm trying to say. I'm being kind of cryptic here. I just think it's cool that there's so much different aspects of light and lighting design and different things that you can do as a lighting designer. Other than the traditional architectural lighting design or theater lighting design or concert lighting design, like stuff like this. And I think it's really cool, and I think it's appropriate to acknowledge these guys as lighting professionals who do this kind of stuff and as a craft that is mastered, if that makes sense. I hope you get what I'm saying. it's just like, lighting is kind of a really niche thing. So I think it's cool that, you have these guys that master this niche thing and actually can be a part of art projects like this and are needed. Like, they needed a lighting professional to do this. They would not have been able to do it without a lighting professional. So I think that's really cool to see out in the world. So many different ways that you can utilize light and utilize lighting professionals and stuff like that. And I think it's cool to see it being utilized in such a creative way. But yeah, so that was called the Shoreline Project from Elizabeth Turk Studios. There's a video of it that you can go watch. You can either watch it on livedesign.com, or I'm sure you could find it on YouTube, called The Shoreline Project, or Vimeo, or whatever. But yeah, so a cool little art project for you guys to hear and go check out, and to inspire you, because I like being inspired, and watching other people do cool things with light is definitely inspiring. I definitely always like to look for things to be inspired by, mostly nature, because, again, light, at the end of the day, is just nature. So, moving on to the next piece of news. I think I have another piece of news. Maybe I don't. I don't think I do. I thought I had written down 3 things, but I guess I didn't. Shoreline, lighting professionals. I think the main thing I wanted to touch was talking about the lighting professionals, and their contributions and that kind of stuff. But again, the Shoreline Project, Elizabeth Turk, go look it up. It's awesome. Light is art. Art is light. We're all having fun. All right, moving on. So the next thing I've got for you is not fixture of the week or news or anything, but rather a little bit of, I guess you could say, fun facts, or as I like to call it in this section, hazer history. So hazer history. Now, I'm not going to go deep diving into like the full history of hazers, because honestly I couldn't find much information on it. Yeah, I didn't really expect to necessarily. But hazer history. So haze, if you don't know what it is, and to the uneducated person or the ignorant person, haze, you'd probably call haze fog or smoke. But it is neither of those things. It is a more subtle, opaque haze that is used to bring out the lighting elements, basically, that you can see the beams of light, if you will. So that's a hazer. A fog machine is something that shoots out really thick, kind of ominous-looking clouds, and it's usually low-lying. So that's more for like theatrical effects, more so than, the lighting aspect of it. So that's haze. But there's a lot of different kinds of hazers as well. So there's these things called, I've never heard this term myself, so I'm learning along with you. They're called crackers, or also known as oil crackers. And apparently they were developed in the 1960s, usually using a refined mineral oil as its fluid. And it's either a spray pump or CO2 gas but it's mechanical. So a CO2 pump or a manual pump to get the haze out. I don't know if that would be atomizing it technically, but for an oil cracker, that's how you'd get the fluid to atomize or turn into haze. But they use strictly refined, usually anyways, refined mineral oil. You can either use like refined mineral oil or water-based haze. Water and oil-based haze usually is the case. And the difference is just what they're made out of, obviously. So with these, it's mechanical, so you don't have to warm up your haze or anything. Like the one I have at work is an MDG atmosphere, and that takes maybe like 5-10 minutes to heat up before it starts producing haze, and that's a CO2 gas operated one. But that one atomizes it inside of the mechanism, as opposed to being mechanical. So you don't actually have to do anything for that one other than turn it on and heat it up and get it going to atomize it. There's also aerosol canisters, which is literally exactly what it sounds like. There's like cans of haze you can get. Obviously, that's not going to stay for very long. It's not really useful, but it is portable, I suppose. And then you have something called an ultrasonic hazer. And these use a transducer submerged in a fluid reservoir to atomize the haze fluid. And a transducer is just something that changes the form of energy into another form of energy. If you were wondering, I had to look that up. But the reason that you would pick an ultrasonic one, for example, is they're promoted as less noisy. So, not that hazers are necessarily noisy. I think the fans are what would be the noisiest thing about it. But an ultrasonic hazer, if you wanted a really quiet hazer, you could go for an ultrasonic hazer. Spec that out. And then lastly, there's these things called phase machines, and literally all it is a fog machine with a fan on it. The only reason you'd really use that is cost effective. A lot of this stuff is probably cost effective. It would probably dictate what kind of hazer you're using. But a phase machine is a fog machine with a fan. So just, I guess, switch the H with an F and think of F for fan. And that would be a phase machine. And then, as for fire detection, a lot of people wonder, like, okay, with all that haze, or they call it smoke. If I had $1 for every time someone's like, hey, man, is this smoke water-based or whatever? It's haze, guys. It's haze. But yes, it's water-based. It won't screw up your throat. It's not smoke. So remember that next time you disappoint your lighting guy by telling him he can't use haze. But in terms of fire detection, I'm sure we've all been to shows that had to be shut down by the fire marshal. But basically, a lot of fire systems in buildings, the way they work is they'll have sensors or catchers or whatever you want to call it that catch particles. And usually, haze particles are small enough to get past the sensor. I think they're like 1 micrometer. I'm not sure what the detection rate is, or like how big the particle has to be for it to be detected by the fire system. But most like water-based haze, oil-based haze, hazers won't trip a fire system, but sometimes they will, and sometimes they might trigger something where the doors need to be open to let smoke out. It really just depends on the room, and how the room's set up, and how the fire system and what kind of fire system it has, to determine whether or not you'd even have to worry about that. For example, at Broken Bowl, where I work, our MDG atmosphere uses a water-based haze fluid, and that does not trigger our smoke doors or our fire system or anything like that. So we can really just pump that thing. However, some guys come in with like radiance hazers and stuff like that, which are usually okay as long as they don't really pump it up. And a lot of guys opt to just stick with our hazer, but if they want more haze, then we can use our hazer in addition to like one of their radiance hazers or something like that. But yeah, so it really just depends on the venue. So it's really just worth asking, or I'm sure someone will tell you, from the venue. The house guy will be like, hey man, just so you know. Usually what I tell people is, hey man, our hazer doesn't trip the system, but yours might. So as long as you know, basically, if the fire system is triggered and the smoke door is open, we basically have to cut all haze until it's done. So I let them know if they're willing to run that risk. Most of the time they're like, oh yeah, we'll just use yours. But in the future, just something to think about is fire detection when it comes to haze, because that can be a problem depending on the venue. I remember when I was out with the National, I was, where was I? I think it was the Palladium, the Hollywood Palladium. It was either the first or second night. The first night went fine, but for some reason on the second night, the fire marshals were really, really being sticklers about the haze, and we had to like cut haze at some point during the show, or else we're going to have to shut down the show. It was an ordeal. I don't remember why, because the first night was perfectly fine. But like I said, it can pose a problem. Definitely something to think about, and to understand anyways, when it comes to hazers and fire detection systems. But here's an interesting little factoid: historical use of hazers. Like we're talking way back. We're talking Globe Theater, Shakespeare stuff. So the Globe Theater apparently in 1598 between 1598 and 1613, they had smoke effects that they used. I'm not sure what they were. I'm sure it was probably nitrogen or something, or dry ice or something. I don't know if they had that back then, but I would imagine it's something like that. And then another one to note is 1934, hydrogen smoke was used at Adelaide Hall, and apparently it was so spectacular and people had never seen it before, so it really caused a sensation. People were really amazed by it. Those are the only two main notable historical use of haze, at least in performances that I found, but definitely interesting, especially the Globe Theatre one. Smoke effects in the Globe Theatre back in I think that's the 16th century. Crazy stuff, but the more you know. All right, moving on to the next section we got here. Something a little bit different for you guys is I'm going to be making some book recommendations here. 2 books specifically, especially if you're just starting out as a newbie in the wonderful world of live entertainment technology. Now, these books are specifically for lighting. Sorry to disappoint you, but the first one I will recommend to you, which I have not finished yet, but I'm in the process of, because I really want to know my electricity stuff. I really want to be the guy on site who really knows his electricity. So I bought a book called Electricity for the Entertainment Electrician and Technician by Richard Cadena. You can probably get it online for like $30. Shop around. It is a textbook, so it might be expensive, but I'm about halfway through it, and it's a lot of good information in here. Definitely worth picking up and reading, especially if you want to really know your electricity, which is a very important thing to know because we use a lot of power, and it can be dangerous if you don't know what you're doing, but definitely worth picking that up so that you can really know your electricity stuff and be the guy that everyone can count on. I sound like I'm like having an ad for this book. No, but I'm serious. It's just good stuff. Get your learn on. Can never stop learning. And then the next book here is called The Automated Lighting Programmer's Handbook by Brad Schiller, 3rd edition. This book I've finished in basically 2 days. Definitely a good read. Really good information. I always have this book on me at all times because it has a lot of good information for troubleshooting and just really good basic programming fundamentals. Especially if you're someone who's kind of self-taught, it's good to have information like this because it's more structured. Like it gives you some really good habits you can get into about programming, what to think of when you're programming, how to prioritize things when you're programming. I mean, it goes into all the networking stuff and the more complicated stuff, which is one of the things I really want to learn because I constantly deal with networking, so I really try to know my networking because, 95% of my job, depending on the show, is networking. So really, really good for that in RDM. But one of my favorite things about this book is he gives you a lot of quotes from other lighting designers and programmers, and he gets a lot of input from industry professionals, which I find really valuable. Because like I said, there's always someone who knows more than you, and I always want to pick people's brains in terms of programming because I really want to develop a correct programming workflow. Like I want to have solid programming. And I'm the kind of guy that I can develop bad habits, so I really want to do it the right way the first time. So definitely recommend picking this book up, either if you're new or you've been in the industry for 20 years, you've been programming lights. I guarantee you there's some information in this book that you would find helpful. Again, it's called The Automated Lighting Programmer's Handbook by Brad Schiller, 3rd edition. But I do want to read a little thing from the book here as well. You can hear me turning the pages. Because at the beginning he puts a list of 10 things that every lighting programmer should know. And I thought I would go through and read them to you guys. Because it's some really good information. Now, I won't read the whole thing. I'll kind of read the name and kind of give you a little bit of the description here. So, Number 1 is understanding the fixtures. When starting a new rig, you should first find out as much as you can about the fixtures you will have. Download manuals, read up on the features and function of the lights, studies the DMX protocol and the map so you understand what happens to the fixture with different DMX values. A good understanding of how the fixture responds to DMX will aid in any programming. In addition, studying the different modes and options of the fixtures can result in optimal settings for your production. Now, one good real-life example of why understanding your fixtures would be a good idea is I'll use the Elation 6-par, for example. 6-pars really don't like being on a DMX chain with other unlike fixtures. And one time it was a corporate event, and we were having a DMX problem, and we ended up having to have the 6-pars on their own DMX line because they just were not playing well with others, which is a common thing for Chinese fixtures and cheaper fixtures like that. Is some of the cheaper fixtures really don't like sharing DMX with anything else. So definitely just a good example of how understanding your fixtures and how they interact with each other in terms of DMX and that kind of stuff. Definitely good information to know on site. And number 2, basic console operations. Of course, if you do not know much about your console, how can you be expected to program it? You do not need to be a full-fledged expert on every aspect of the desk, although it doesn't hurt. But at the very least, you must be able to patch, create queues, recall queues, and back up the data. Yeah, so don't go calling yourself a console operator if you barely know how to operate the console. But yeah, so just basically know what you're doing. Know what you're doing or don't call yourself a programmer. Next up, which kind of was also covered by number 2, is patching and addressing. Once you have studied the fixtures and grasped the concepts of your console, it is essential that you know how to connect the two together. Properly patching and addressing the fixtures is a skill every programmer must possess. The more information you can provide to the crew about the patch, the better. Too often, I have seen productions where the programmer did not create a patch until he or she was on site, leaving everyone waiting around for the information. Now, I always like to pre-patch. Usually, I'll have one of my buddies who's out on a gig or something. Sometimes he'll hit me up and be like, hey man, can you pre-patch this for me or pre-program this for me or whatever it is? That way, when they get to the job site, that's one less thing they have to worry about, and it's all done already. So definitely good to, patch and do all the little stuff that you can do at home. Anything you can do at home that saves you time on the job site, you should do. And that is definitely one of them. Because usually these companies have proprietary software like MA2 on PC, all that stuff. So I can go in, I can have a patch, I can put it on a USB drive, I can show up to the job site, and I can plug it into the desk, we have our rig built, and I got control because my patch is right. So definitely know how to patch and address and understand how to organize that. Really make sure you know how to organize, or at least you know the standard way that most people organize their patch. Like is it truss or fixture type, blah, 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 blah. So make sure you know if you're patching for somebody, you know how they like it set up. Especially for someone who designs for you. Like if you're working for a designer and you're his operator or your programmer, it's definitely worthwhile to really understand their programming language and their workflow and how they make queue stacks and how they do things. That way, when you're working for them or you're making their patch for them or whatever, you know how they like it. So that way, when they're out, they plug it in, they see your work, your patch, and it's exactly how they like it, they'll use you every time. So definitely know how to patch and address. Just know the console. Just know the console. Next one, number 4, making lights move. The most basic function you should be able to accomplish is to move your fixtures from point A to point B using a repeatable method. And repeatable method is a very important thing. Because if it's repeatable, you can get to it quickly and you can change it quickly, which is exactly what you want. Programming is all about speed. So if you really want to organize your workflow and your desk with usability and speed in mind. So making lights move, point A to point B, yeah. Generally, this requires 2 queues or steps of a chase, one with fixtures in position A and the other with fixture in position B. I'm sure we all know how to do that. Then crossfading between the 2 queues, the fixtures will move at the selected crossfade speed. And you can and then apply these same procedures to other parameters of your fixtures. So yeah, once you kind of point A to point B, you can start adding other stuff. You can do the same thing with dimming effects, color effects, blah, 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 blah. You name it, put it in your queue stack. Speaking of Q-Stacks, you'll often hear older dudes complaining about, oh, these young whippersnappers, they don't know what it takes to make a 30-step chase or something like that. They're all about, they're like, oh, they rely on the effects engine too much, which I will concede. I say that a lot of people probably do rely on the effects engine too much. Personally, I find the old style of programming in a Q-Stack to be a lot simpler in terms of, like, I don't like to overcomplicate my program, because I know a lot of guys whose program style is like full-on macro heavy, as crazy as possible. You want to make it as complicated as possible, so you can, make it the show as crazy as possible. You want as much options as you can in your programming. Let's say you had a busking show or something. But I have personally seen people, that's kind of can be a pitfall, because that can, when it's really complicated, obviously, that in itself is a problem, especially if the gig that you're doing isn't necessarily required to be that complicated. And if your show file is that crazy complicated, it's really unnecessary. Well, let's say I'm going to do a small corporate gig, and all I needed to do is go in, program my color palettes, make a few looks, make a few changeovers, small Q stacks. Why do I need to have a show that, one Q triggers like 10 different macros to do a bunch of crazy stuff? Unnecessary and dangerous, because I have seen, I was not the LD that day, but one of our guys does program like that. He's a wicked good programmer. It's awesome. Definitely respect, and it's cool. Don't get me wrong, it's awesome. I love the complicated technical programming stuff. I just try not to. I just don't do it, because you really got to know your stuff, because stuff can happen, especially with really heavy, complicated show files. Can kind of bog down the machine. But it was he was running a show, and I think it was because he programmed on a newer software version, and we had not updated our MA2 yet. So technically his show file crashed the board, probably because it was one of his macros or something in there between the update and the crazy. And this was his fresh show file, so he had just reprogrammed it and made it even crazier than the last one, and it crashed the console. So definitely something to think about. And I've heard, more experienced programmers talk about how, don't be like that, because that can cause you problems, and unnecessary problems. So I've definitely taken the advice to, while that stuff is respectable and really cool, and you should want to know how to do that, and maybe even you should know how to do that, because that's knowing the console. But really, as an automated lighting programmer, what I think he's trying to say is that just get the job done, and get the job done right. I'm kind of went on a tangent here about programming, but that's just something I thought of, and I thought, I'd share with you guys. See what you think about it, or maybe something you thought of in your programming or whatever. But just my kind of 2 cents on that kind of thing. Let's move on to number 5, which is long hours and late nights. Our industry often gives the lighting team the late night shift, so you must be prepared to spend many long nights at the console. Knowing how to prepare your body and mind for hours of starting at one canvas while helping to create multiple paintings is essential. Me, I don't have a problem with that stuff. I love staying up late. So in that aspect, it doesn't really affect me too much. But you will be working long hours, and you will be working late nights. Like, you'll be working entire days sometimes. So definitely be prepared to get your ass kicked, because there'll be some days where you'll be working 18 hours, maybe even no breaks or stuff like that. But yeah, so just be prepared to bust your ass, even if you're working at a console. Me personally, I really like the idea, or like really late night. Let's say you're in a theater or a ballroom or a corporate space or a venue, and you're programming something. It's super late at night. It's just you, maybe you and a designer, you and another guy or a friend or something, and you're just in there at night, maybe drinking some chamomile tea, and you're just sitting there programming. I think that sounds super relaxing and therapeutic and awesome, because I enjoy it. I enjoy programming, so to me that sounds awesome. So long hours, late nights, sitting at a desk, that's my cup of tea any day of the week. Then number 6, Subtractive versus additive color mixing. Definitely want to know the difference here. This is what he says. The most common color mixing in traditional moving lights uses 3 graduated dichroic filters, cyan, magenta, and yellow. By combining the 3, you can create millions of colors. And that's called subtractive color mixing because technically you are removing or filtering out certain wavelengths of light. Instead of adding color, you're removing wavelengths to get the color that you want. And that's CMY, subtractive color mixing. And then the other kind is RGB, which is technically additive. So most light-emitting diodes or LEDs fixtures use additive color mixing by combining red, green, and blue sources. But some RGB fixtures will have RGBW, give you a white channel or its own amber channel, or even, I know Philips Hue. I have Philips Hue in my entire house. I know that I'm pretty sure they mix with lime green and an amber instead of straight green and blue or red or something. So you can get a lot better color mixing if you have a lime, for example, which I didn't know about until fairly recently, so kind of cool. But I'm pretty sure Philips Hue do use a lime to color mix, which gives them some really good, rich colors and 16 million colors to choose from. But yeah, definitely know the difference when it comes to color mixing, especially between fixtures, because you can kind of tie that into knowing your fixtures as well. Just for color mixing, because RGB might look a lot different than the CMY fixture. Some consoles I know you can calibrate them so that your color mixing is the same across, CMY, RGB, or color flag, or color wheel fixtures or something. There's ways you can do it, but definitely something to keep note of is color theory, obviously, because half of what we do is color. So half of what we do, literally everything we do is based around color. Color is basically all we do. It's like one of the most important parts of lighting is color. So there's my phone again. All right, number 7. This is tracking. This is definitely an important one because I had trouble with this when I was a newbie programming. Number 7, tracking. Conventional lighting desks commonly record all values for all channels into every queue. Moving light consoles make use of tracking by recording only channels with changed values into each queue. This significantly reduces the amount of data in each queue and enables many tricks for dynamic programming and playback. So you're really going to want to pay attention to tracking when you're programming queue stacks on like an MA2, for example, or like moving lights, when you're doing a lot of stuff, because basically, let's say you make a queue with a color chase in it. If you don't stop that or end the effect in that queue and you have tracking on, it will track into the next queue. So let's say you change the position. It'll change the position, but it will carry over the color chase that you had from the last one. So if you don't want it to do the color chase in the next queue, you got to make sure you stomp it from the queue. That way it doesn't track over into your next queue. Basically, my advice on this is just really, like I was saying before, you really want to have solid, good programming and workflow. So really make sure you pay attention to tracking and what you want and what you do not want tracked into your next queue, because it can really screw up your queue stacks if you don't pay attention to tracking. So definitely know about tracking. Protect the data. This is number 8. This is a very important one, which is one that I've recently been really trying to be better at. This is protect the data. A good programmer will protect the data in the console with his or her life. Yes, a bit dramatic, but your life. That show is your life. Protect it as such. A good programmer will protect the data in the console with his or her life. You are hired to enter the data into the console and to see that it remains there and can be recalled at all times. Proper saving routines are essential, as well as requiring an uninterruptible power supply and a dedicated power source. If something goes wrong and all data is lost, you have no options for recovery, then you're the only one to blame. So yeah, protect that data, that USB with your life. Save your show on like 5 different USBs. Save it on your computer, save it on your laptop, save it at home, have someone else save it on their flash drives. You want to make sure that if anything happens to your data or your show, you have another way to get it back. Because think about it. Let's say, what if you're working for a huge A-lister artist and right before the show, the console crashes and you didn't save your show and you made all these changes. You didn't save your show. You didn't save it onto another USB. Let's say your USB breaks and on the load and it gets crushed by a road case and that's your only USB and you didn't save the show on the console or your computer. Well, damn, you're done for. So protect the data. Save it a million times. Name your show files appropriately. Have a bunch of flash drives. But this is definitely something that I've been trying to do a lot more. Because I remember one time I thought I had saved a show file and I didn't, and I wanted to program at home, but I couldn't because I didn't fully save it onto my my flash drive. All of them. So definitely look into getting a bulk flash drives and save your show. Save your show like it's your damn life. Next, number 9, which is a very important one, if not the most important in my opinion. And I would probably say that people have the most trouble, or this is the one that I think people should take really deeply to heart, including myself, is how to admit your faults. If a lighting designer asks you for a particular effect or look and you are unsure of how to create it, admit it. Do not tell the LD that it is not possible. Either find a way to make it happen or tell him or her you do not know how to do it. And he goes on to give an example of one LD who asked the programmer for a specific thing, and the programmer says, oh, I can't do that. It can't do that. So he said, literally the equipment was incapable of doing that. But the designer had known that that's not the case because the programmer he had previously worked with had done it. So, obviously, that makes you look bad. If another programmer had done it and you say that you literally can't do it, well, then that designer probably not going to want to work with you. So always admit your faults. And I always tell this is kind of what I like to tell people is there's always someone that knows more than you, and as long as you respect that, you'll be good. I kind of operate from a position that everybody knows more than me. I want to learn as much as possible, and so the best way to do that is to act like I don't know anything. So definitely, put your ego aside, because I feel like this industry, because we work with a lot of big artists and because it's such a cool thing, lighting design, a lot of guys get a big head and act like they're hot shit because, ooh, I'm a lighting designer. Or like a lot of guys who don't even do any programming or lighting design is that they'll really try to make people think that they're designing or programming or touring or whatever. Like a lot of guys will post about it, but then not put in the work to do it. And I think that makes you look bad. So I think it's really important for people to be humble. And, like I said, respect that there's always going to be people that know more than you. And there's nothing worse than getting caught in a lie of saying you know how to do something when you actually don't. And then you don't come through with it. Who would want to work with you again after that? So, there's a limit to fake it till you make it. I always like to say fake it till you make it does not mean, you do something you have no idea how to do. Fake it till you make it means, you technically have the background knowledge. You just have to go in and do it. So definitely, that's kind of how I interpret number 9, how to admit your faults. At least that's how I think he's kind of what he's saying, and just kind of my 2 cents, because I feel like people just have the tendency or that they just the egos. People have egos, and nothing's more annoying than some kid who's coming in and acts like he knows everything. Like, well, what if I walked into Brooklyn Bowl and acted like, oh yeah, I've never touched a console before, but makes you look bad. And people don't want to teach people that act like they know everything. So just be super humble and respectful. Again, there's always people that know more than you, and those are the people that you want to learn from the most. So be humble. Admit your faults. Admit when you're wrong, admit when you don't know something, and you'll be good to go. Because it's better to admit that you don't know something and learn how to do it than to say you know how to do something when you don't know how to do it, and then you get in trouble, or your reputation gets ruined, or people don't want to work with you anymore. So just Be home, guys. But wait, there's more. Just kidding. Number 10, who to call. This is the last one. Write down the support phone numbers for all the lighting manufacturers and keep this list with you at all times. Then when a problem develops or when you need to know how to do something, call for assistance. Now, this applies to not just manufacturers, but I would also say get yourself a mentor or get yourself a guy who really knows his stuff that you can call when you have a pinch. My person for that is Ben. He's our head of lighting at Broken Bowl. He's an MA guru, an amazing programmer, super awesome guy. Most of what I know about lighting is from him, at least when it comes to programming and stuff like that. So definitely, get a support system of people who you can call when you're in a pinch. Because a lot of the times, man, even on these tours, guys will be like, oh, how do I do this? And obviously the house guys don't know everything. So you really want to have someone to call, be it a manufacturer or another LD or a programmer or, one of these lighting companies or gear companies that you need to get some information from. Definitely good to have a good base of people to call when you literally don't know what you're doing or you need help. So yeah, that was the 10 things that every automated lighting programmer should know from the Automated Lighting Programmer's Handbook by Brad Schiller. So again, definitely recommend that if you're an aspiring lighting professional, a current lighting professional, or a seasoned lighting professional, all of these books, or both of these books, are definitely worth reading. So that's the Automated Lighting Programmer's Handbook by Brad Schiller, 3rd edition, and then I have Electricity for the Entertainment Electrician and Technician by Richard Cadena. Definitely worth checking these out. I was recommended these by other professionals, so I'm recommending them to you now. Go get your learn on. Become qualified technicians. Have good workflow. Let's all be the best we can be. The best automated lighting programmer you can be. And it's cool to read a book. All right, so let's move on to the questions. The last segment, always end with the questions. This actually might end up being the longest episode I've done. We're at 47 minutes right now. We probably might get to an hour. That'd be cool. I know people were saying that they would like to have it be a little bit longer, so hopefully you guys like that, like the length of this episode. So some of these questions I kind of had already answered earlier, which is color theory, subtractive versus additive, CMY versus RGB, color choice. So when designing, and I haven't done too much like real design work, I'm more of an operator right now, so I'm not necessarily coming from a place of experience, but when it comes to color, at least in theater's more about like conveying a story with light than concert lighting. So when lighting for theater, obviously the first thing you want to think of is seeing the actors. So you make sure you have your good white front wash so you can see the actors. And the rest is really just depends on the story and your artistic direction. But again, I don't do theater, so I'm going to talk about concert lighting. So, or a corporate event, technically, too. You could throw that under the umbrella. So, basically, when I'm listening to a song or I'm running lights for a band or something, obviously, color is all about emotion and mood. So, and texture, I guess, technically, too. But color conveys a mood to the human psyche. So, really cool whites are going to promote, work and being awake. Really warm whites are easier on the eyes and might promote relaxation. Blue can be a sad color, can be somber. Red can mean evil, or it can mean love, depending on the scene. It also changes depending on culture. What colors mean what. But generally, each color kind of is associated with its own emotion. So let's say it's a sad song, I might pick blue, like a color palette with a lot of blues in it. But again, I haven't done much design work when it comes to actually designing a rig or a show like that. But I I do wonder, I'll have to ask somebody and maybe interview somebody, have them on the podcast to kind of explain their artistic direction or their process when they're designing a show and how they pick color. But, if you know color theory, you know what colors look good with each other. But aside from what looks cool, color's all about mood. So when I'm running a show and I'm listening to the song, or if I know a song and it sounds kind of somber, or the subject material's somber, maybe I'll pick a blue. But a lot of the time, to me, a song will kind of have a color feel to it. Like when I listen to it, there's certain colors that I think of, and then I'll usually either go with that or work around that. So, listen to the songs and kind of feel it, and then, pick colors based off of that. And then usually it'll give you kind of like a feeling or a general idea of like, oh, this feels like a red. This song feels like a blue song. Oh, this song feels like kind of fiery, so I'll do red, orange, and yellows, or, whatever it is. So that's kind of like color theory and picking color. It's all about mood, like I said. And just look with concert lighting, a lot of time it's probably just what looks cool, because it's not theater. The next one is someone had asked me, lighting people versus just making it look cool. And really, the only difference between that is when you're lighting people, you want to make sure, obviously, the main job of a lighting person is so you can see the action, see the people that are on stage. So as long as you can see the people, that kind of aspect is covered. But again, you can work with that too. You can do backlighting, you can do side lighting if you really want to light the body. Like if you want to highlight the body for like a dance show, you're going to want to use a lot of side light and not so much front light. Honestly, I think side light looks better anyways. I don't like front light. I like colored front light, but I don't like how front light can kind of wash out the rest of the lights on stage, so you can't see as much as of the structures, or you get what I mean. You've washed the stage in white so you can see the actors. Some of the colors get washed out and it doesn't look as cool. So I like to use either very focused front light, colored front light, or no front light at all, and maybe just use side light. Like, for example, for the national tour, we didn't have any front light from what... because we had 3 flying trusses and a floor package, and then it was just GLP impressions on the side is kind of what was used to light the band. Because I think lighting a band from the side is a lot better because it's a little bit more dramatic. You're lighting their body. You're not seeing, exactly their face. It gives them a little bit of, it just looks cool. It looks more artistic. It looks more intentional when it's lit from the side, as opposed to just straight on front light. So, there's it's a little bit flexible with how you light people, as long as you can see them. But another thing to take into account is when you're lighting people is if it's being filmed. If it's an IMAG show, then you really have to pay attention to lighting people in front light. Then you really want to make sure you know what the color temperature of your front light is so that the people filming can color correct. Kind of working along hand in hand with video, but that's a very important thing. IMAG would fall under the jurisdiction of a lighting designer, and you should definitely know the color temperature of your front light, or at least a general idea that you can give a photographer. So definitely, and that's something that I recently kind of thought about, because I had a photographer ask me, oh, what color temperature is your front light? And I was like, oh, I don't really have that information in front of me. The console's not going to tell me that. But I kind of gave her a general idea of what it was, and it was like 35. It was like 3,000 or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but I kind of gave her a general idea so she could color correct, or white balance, or whatever you photographers do, white balance or color correct the front light so that it looks the best for IMAG. So that's something to really pay attention to when you're lighting people for television or movies or anything that's being filmed, and you want to look really good on camera. Definitely pay attention to that. And if you're just making it look cool, just make it look cool. You don't have to worry about that stuff. And then someone was wondering about artistic vision of the artist versus like the designer. And like I said before, I haven't done any extensive design work. I'm still young. I haven't really quite got to that level of career yet. Someday, when I get there, I'll let you know. But at least from watching interviews and hearing professionals talk about it, I'll use the 1975 as an example. The 1975, their lead singer, Matty Healy, he is very involved with the design process. From what I've heard, his designer is Tobias Rylander. So two very strong artistic personalities who work together, and they, in my opinion, they have some of the coolest looking shows around right now. So in that aspect, sometimes it's a straight up collaboration. But I know, for example, an Elton John show, I was watching an interview with his designer at the time. I don't remember his name. But basically he was like, "Oh, Elton John, what kind of production do you want? Like, what are your ideas?" And Elton John was like, "Oh, I don't care. You do whatever you want. I hired you to design." So sometimes an artist might want to work with you. Sometimes an artist will just give you complete creative freedom and to let you do your thing as a professional designer. Or some artists will have complete control over their show, and you just have to do exactly what they want, how they want it. And that's just what you have to do. At the end of the day, that's kind of what you have to do anyways. But really, artist input and design between the artist and the designer really just depends on how the artist is and how they handle their productions. I personally think a setup like the 1975 has, where it's a collaborative effort, because you have the designers who know the technical aspects and know how to lighting design, but then you have the musicians who wrote the music, and they know exactly the kind of message that they're trying to portray, or the whole feel of the song. They know that more than anybody because they wrote it. So I think the best productions probably are a collab, or where the artists and the designers work really closely with each other and have good creative freedom and bounce ideas off each other. I think that's a good recipe for some of the best productions, like the 1975's productions, like the last one they did and the new one they're doing. That's kind of my take on that. But again, I haven't done much design work. Haven't gotten to that part of my career yet. Hopefully in the future I get to do a lot of design, because that's something I really am interested in. All right, so that's it for episode 4 of Techs in the City. I hope you guys enjoyed it. This was a little bit of a longer one. We're almost at an hour. So I hope that's a good length for you guys. I hope it's not too long, not too short, just right, around an hour. I'll probably try to keep the episodes at about an hour. 45 minutes to an hour is kind of my goal. So let me know what you think about that. Thanks for listening, whoever you are. Hopefully we'll gain more listeners. Hopefully a lot of this information is really useful or interesting to you, because that's kind of why I wanted to do it, was to give people this information and also to give myself the information, and it gives me an excuse to really dive deep into my craft and learn stuff and study and read books. So hopefully it inspires you to do the same. But so that was episode 4 of Techs in the City. I will see you on the next one. Again, we're on Spotify, we're on iTunes, we're on SoundCloud, all at Techs in the City. You should be easy to find on all those streaming services. So that's that. Again, this is your host, Noah. Thanks for listening. This has been Techs in the City, and I will see you on the next one.